Hello and welcome to this video where we'll be covering about strings, methods, and formatting. So we'll get straight to it. So we have learned the basics of strings so far, and just using the basic techniques of strings can be quite limited. Luckily, strings do come with a lot of methods that are really useful for you to handle various types of inputs and outputs. So what is methods? Well, each type of class of objects has a set of functions that operate on an object of that type. So we will cover about objects later on, but just think that as whatever we create in Python, they are subclass of objects. So if you think about like an animal hierarchy, so the animals have like mammals or something like that. Mammals can be further divided into like birds or the ground animals, things like that. So it goes into hierarchies, right? But at the top, it's still classified as animals. So the more broader term of describing pretty much everything is objects, and that's where we start. But don't worry about it for now. If you don't understand, we'll cover this object stuff in another series of video, right? So different types of objects have different methods. Methods are specific operations that you can do with that particular object that you have. So in Python, in order to use the methods, the syntax is pretty simple. So you first have the object name followed by a full stop, a dot, and then you provide the method name, and then you open the round brackets. If there are any arguments, you provide them. Otherwise, it's just an empty bracket. So for example, if we create a string called name, so name equals, quotation mark, like John Doe, something like that, then we can call a find method associated with the string, which is attached to the variable name. So it goes name dot find, and find is a method that allow you to find whether the character exists in the given string or not. If it finds it, then it will give you the index of where it found it in the first time. Otherwise, it's going to return -1. Okay. To get into technical details, this is roughly equivalent to find function calling with a name object and the input variable string x. So calling a method of a particular object is like calling an equivalent function that takes the object as its first parameter. So think like there's a function actually doing it, but that function is now attached to the object as the method. So you don't have to worry about this at this moment. All you have to remember is how to use the method, which is object name dot method name and so forth. So let's have a look at some examples. Let's do the name dot find example first. So let's open a terminal and open up the shell. So let's create a name variable first. Name equals John Doe. Okay, so now we created a variable called name, which is string, right? So string has a method called find. So name dot find, and we're going to look for variable x, character x, and in this case, x does not exist, so we expect it to return -1. However, if we do try to find letter, say O, this should return the first occurrence of this particular letter that it finds, so it's going to be 1. Okay. If you need some help, so help name dot find, so you can pass in create instance of an object in the find help function. It will still tell you what it does. So find is a method of built-in string. So you can also call this with the other string, and it tells you it needs to have returns the lowest index in S, where substring sub is found. So actually, it doesn't have to be just a single character, but it can be multiple characters. So if I have OE, then it's going to return the index of the second O, which is 4, 5, 6. So that's this particular example here. And I just shown you one example, but there's a bunch of others, right? So these are some of the string method that you will find quite useful when you are programming. So it's a good idea to get used to these and understand how these methods work. Okay, so I will leave you to explore these string methods yourself, but you should be able to quickly figure out each one and get used to using them fairly quickly. And you will cover a lot of them in the labs as well. So here's an example program that we're going to just test. So we're going to ask, I'll say full name is fname equals input, enter your full name. Okay, now I have to enter. So let's input exactly what it was. Natalie Ing. Okay, so now if we look at fname, it contains the string Natalie Ing. Okay, names dot names equals fname dot split. Okay, if you look up the definition of the split method, it's going to create a list by splitting by a given input parameter. But if you don't provide an input parameter, then by default, it's going to use a space to divide them. So if I look at names, it should contain two items in the list, which is Natalie and Ing. Okay, so we can define each one. First name equals name 0 because index start from 0. Last name equals name 1. So if you look at first name, we have, oops, not name, names, sorry, names. So update them straight away. First name equals name 0. Okay, so first name is Natalie and last name equals Ing. Okay, so that's what we expected. But in Python, you can do multiple assignments per line as well. And sometimes it makes sense, sometimes it doesn't. So it really depends. So I'm going to create a new variable. So fname and lname to represent the first name, last name as well. They haven't been defined. So if I just type first name, oh, I have defined. Oh, because that's a full name. Okay. First name, no underscore, doesn't exist. First name, last name equals names 0, names 1. Okay, so I can write out what I have tried before into a single line. So now if I look at first name, it should contain Natalie, and of course last name Ing. So you can see that for this particular example, it makes sense to have them on a single line, but not always, right? So it depends on your usage and the given case. So you can determine whether it is better to separate them onto 2 lines or multiple lines, or have them on a single line in order to check by checking the readability of how you write the code. Okay. Anyway, continue with the example. So I'm just gonna say corrected. First name equals first name dot capitalize. Okay, and corrected last name equals last name dot capitalize. Okay, so now we have the capitalized letters. So we can say print hi, corrected first name, and corrected last name. Okay, then you say hi Natalie Ing with the correct first letters capitalized. Okay, so this code given here should work even if your input was really strange like this over here. So you can try that yourself. So you can easily find the documentation. Most of them you should be able to access through the help menu or by using the built-in dir and or help function in the shell. So let's create a string, just random string called la. So now s is a type string, so we can go dir s. What it does is it shows you all the methods associated with the string here. Okay, but this only lists all the methods that are available. It doesn't give you explanation. So if you want to look at the explanations, you write help of s dot index. So you're interested in this particular index method, then it's going to show you the details about this particular index. If you want to see all of the string methods and its explanations, you can definitely type help s. S is a string, so it tells you to use the help on string. Okay, then it's gonna show you. You can scroll through this because it's quite long. If you scroll down, it's going to show you like explanations for like is our num, and then the details is alpha, is identifier, and so forth. Press Q to quit out of the help menu. Okay, help type S also works by showing the class help menu as well. So these are some different ways to get some documentations about those. Now we have seen that we're able to do stuff with the strings, but obviously displaying them through the print can be quite cumbersome, especially if you have multiple variables, right? And we have found that strings, you can only concatenate them by with other strings, which can be quite cumbersome because you have to cast different types like integers or floats into strings before you have to do them. So the code you write to do that becomes very messy, which is not good. So to overcome that, there are formatting methods provided for the strings. So that's the example that we usually use to construct strings by adding the strings together. It's cumbersome and can control number of output digits of float values. There's a lot of difference, right? So the solution is to use f strings. Okay, so here is the f string basics, right? F strings are strings where you start the string with the letter F before you start the quotation mark. If you provide F at the very beginning, by default, the Python will understand that this is a F string. Okay, you can add F string even without variables. It will still work like normal strings as well. So it is a good habit to use strings, and if you need to format it, make sure you use the F strings. There are other methods that have been proposed previously, but you'll find the F string is much more verbose and easy to use. So here's an example. We have the name and a height. So with the previous example, you will have to convert the height into strings and put it together, which is quite cumbersome and makes the line very long. That's the example. And also, you can't really control the decimal points. So in this example, we can do this by, let's create a name first. Name equals James. Okay, height equals 194.674532. Okay, so we can print f string name in curly bracket name. So by adding a curly bracket, it's saying that this is a variable that's coming from our local namespace. So remember, the local namespace is your inside your memory where you keep list of all the variable names. Okay, so we have defined names. So this name is referring to the variable name outside. Height is height, and then close the a bit bigger. Enter. Okay, so name James, height is that. Okay, we'll show you how to format the decimal places very shortly. Okay, and before f strings, we used to use the formatting, which looks like this. But sometimes it's quite confusing because you have to match which variable goes into which brackets. Okay, So you see that F strings are much more verbose than any of the previous methods that we can use, and also more simpler than concatenating the strings. Okay, and this also means we can chuck in expressions into F strings straight away. So you don't have to create a variable to include equations to calculate. So we can just go print F. It doesn't have to be double quotation. You can use it with a single quote or triple quote. So here's an example. Sum of 4 and 9 is, and then you go 4 plus 9. Okay, enter. Sum of 4 and 9 is 13, right? And we can do it with the calling functions inside that as well. So say my list equals 1, 2, 3, and then print f the sum of the list is, and then here we know that there's a built-in function called sum, and then we pass in the my list inside, and then close the string, and the sum of the list is 6. Okay. So that makes it very easy to utilize and call functions in order to display strings into the outputs. So in order to format the strings nicely inside the code, sometimes you will have to write them onto multiple lines, and that can be quite messy, right? But this is one way of doing it. So here is the name. So let me just copy that code actually. So I'm going to open this. I copied the code and just pasted it here. So you see that name is James, profession is killer, affiliation is MI6. And then I have this thing called message. Okay, so if I print message, this is on a single line, right? Hi, James, you are a killer working for MI6. However, inside my code, I can write them onto multiple lines, because obviously if I write those on a single line, it might become very wide. So this is just a simple example, but oftentimes you'll find that you want to write some messages that can be quite long. So this is a good way of managing a very long lines onto multiple lines, so it's more compact and easy to read. Okay, so other than using the brackets, you can of course use the backslashes, but you'll find that using the brackets, it's much more manageable and easier to find where the message begins and ends as well. Because if I copy that over onto the Python code inside the IDE, you will quickly find if you press on the bracket, it will show you and highlight where the closing bracket is. Okay, but if you do the backslash, so you will actually have to find where the line ends yourself. Okay, the next one is trying to use the same quotation mark inside your F strings. And this is exactly the same as the normal strings. If you want to use a double quotation mark inside an F string where you started with a double quotation mark, then you can use the backslash to escape the double quotation mark and use it inside. So that's, you already know. The other one is if you want to display the braces, the curly ones. You can do it by adding extra curly brackets that indicates that it is not one to evaluate. So let's do that. So if I do single brackets, I'm just going to do a simple calculation, and we'll know that it's going to evaluate what's inside the curly bracket and display, right? But by adding another curly braces, then it's indicating that inside the curly braces, it's already an expression, but by studying the curly braces, do not evaluate this, but show that as a string. Okay, so now it's showing that as 5 plus 3. Now, if you do want to evaluate that, of course, you can do it by adding an extra braces. So inside an extra braces, it's saying, okay, that's an expression. Let's evaluate that. And outside the two braces is indicating that, okay, display this particular brace as a string. So now we get a brace showing with the evaluated number. Now, if you want to show double braces, we just have to keep on adding the braces there. And there you go. You can also add numbers in between. So 4 plus 1, like this. So because now it's inside the 2 braces, it's showing inside with only 1 brace outside. Okay, it's quite confusing with the words, isn't it? Okay, so 2 braces for 4 plus 1. So it's only inside 1 brace. But 5 plus 3 is inside 4. Okay, so there's 4 levels. So its output is 2 levels of braces. Of course, we can evaluate 4 plus 1 by putting it inside curly braces. Now it's going to be evaluated, right? So that's the curly braces to display inside the F string evaluations. However, if you do want to mix those curly brace outputs, it might be better to have expressions separated from what you want to print. Okay, so that's the basics of string formatting, but here is more details on how to format them in detail. So far what we have done is just put in the variable, but you can also control the width of that particular variable you're trying to print. I'll show you how this plays later. And also decide the number of precision, the number of decimal points you want to display if it's a value that contains decimal numbers. So here's some examples down here. Width equals 15, precision equals 2, value equals some number, right? Some big number. Okay. Print, let's print. F string result is inside a curly bracket value with width dot precision F, right? And then close the curly brackets and close the string and print. Okay, so you see that a bunch of white spaces have been added because I have set the width to be 15. So including the ones that are printed, all of it should be 15 characters. So let's count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, right? So that's the 15 characters. So if our value changes, let's change it. Value equals 1.2, okay? And then print the same again. Then it's going to show you that it aligns where the other result is. So after the single space after the result, if you count it, that should be 15 characters long. The question is, what happens if your value is larger than 15 characters long? Well, let's make that some big number that's more than 15 characters long, and it's just integer, right? Doesn't matter. So if I print this, what it's going to do is actually print all of the value and overflows the given width. So this way you don't lose the information about the value, because if it doesn't fit, it's just going to override the width to suit whatever it is, but it will still display the precision of 2 decimal places. Okay, so that's how we use to control the string outputs with the width and the precision here. Okay, you can also justify the string by simply adding the arrow character. So for example, we have S1 equals A, S2 equals AB, S3 equals ABC, S4 equals ABCD. Okay. Print, actually, let's copy that. I do have to make strings. Oh, okay. It didn't like me copy and paste it. Not a problem. It's because of the character. Okay, sorry. Just finish that. Now I will just print the strings. Okay. Print. Actually, let me copy it over here and run this particular one. Yeah, string, but it's complaining about the quotation mark because it's not the format is needed, but it's in a Unicode. Okay, so let's change that. Okay, so fixed. Okay, so to change this. Okay, now let's run this code. So execute it. Then you'll see that the alignment has gone to the right, and the width of this should be 10 characters. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Okay. Or you can simply check by printing 10 dots next to it. Print 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Okay, so that's 10 dots, and execute this. So you see that 10 dots are filled and stops where the last characters are all aligned to. Okay. And this can also be used to quickly convert the number notations between different formats. So for example, okay, so value equals 300. We want to print inside a string val in hex format. Okay, so it's 12C. We can convert it into octal. We can convert it into scientific. Okay, so all of these are useful in order to quickly convert the type between values. Okay, F-string is also very useful for objects. Again, this will make much better sense later on when we cover objects. But if we do create an object, say class person, and we have a print function, which is the string representation defined, then we can simply print the object inside a F string. Then it will just call that method directly. But this will make much more sense later on, so don't worry too much about it. We will revisit this definitely, but this makes it a whole lot easier in order to interact with different objects and printing about objects. So that concludes this particular video. So hopefully you'll find them helpful. Otherwise, stay tuned for the next one. Bye.